So let's get started. Greeting fellow aspirants. Welcome to yet another stimulating and insightful lecture number 17, that is of Thomas Hobbes by UPSC Geek by NRG. So today we are going to dive into an intriguing world of political science. And the name which comes to my brain is none other than the English scholar, that is Thomas Hobbes. So grab your quills and parchment and let's explore the political labyrinth of Thomas Hobbes. So without moving further, I would love to have you all subscribe to the channel, that is UPSC Geek by NRG, and also like the video. So let's get started. First, this will be the first part of Thomas Hobbes, where we will be dealing with his life and time, and Thomas Hobbes' magnum opus, that is Leviathan, and some of his most prominent works, and also we will be dealing with his concept of sovereignty. Thomas Hobbes was the first eminent and profound philosopher or political thinker who have propounded the idea of sovereignty in the modern terms. So let's see life and time of Thomas Hobbes. So there are two life and times of Thomas Hobbes, which the first one is his general life and time, and second one which is pertinent to our political science. So let's see the real life and time of Thomas Hobbes, that is his original life and time. So Thomas Hobbes, an English philosopher, was born in Malmesbury in 1581 AD to a humble family of an Anglican clergyman. Hobbes was a brilliant youth, but his parents could not afford to give him a higher education. Yes, you have heard it very right. It was, however, with the intervention of his relatives that Hobbes could be sent to Oxford University at the age of 15, just 15. After completing his studies, he joined a powerful Seventh family as a tutor, which fortunately gave patronage to the tutor, which accrued him opportunity to explore the Europe in its entirety. There he could meet a leading scientist and literary figures and was impressed by those intellectual minds upon whom the Hobbes was influenced a lot, and they will also be influencing Thomas Hobbes while formulating his political thought. So let's see life and time of Thomas Hobbes, which is pertinent for political science subject. So Hobbes belonged to Britain. He has witnessed the troubled phase of British history. So what was that troubled phase which Hobbes experienced? So it was Puritan Revolution of 1641. So what was Puritan Revolution? Just to give you a brief, it was a complete chaos at the time of Hobbes. In this revolution, there was a different contending groups, that is Catholics versus Protestants, Royalists versus anti-Royalist. So just to give you a premise, there was a power tussle going on between the monarchies and the republicans. And at the end, the republican prevailed over monarchy, and there was a complete revolution of power. And hence it was a bloodshed movement in the European history. And the Thomas Hobbes is the child of the Puritan Revolution, and hence his perspective of political thought will be shaped according to the time that was Puritan Revolution. In this situation, there was no security of either life or property. Hence, the main concern of Hobbes became order or security, because there was no security of either life and property, and hence the main concern for Hobbes will be order or security in the state. Hobbes' main concern was the protection of life. Hobbes has established right to life or right to self-preservation as absolute right. Hobbes, being a contractualist theorist who will give prominent stature to right to life or right to self-preservation as the absolute right. There is no right which is beyond right to life. Why? If you think deeply, why does the idea of absolute right, of right to life, is being propounded by Hobbes? Because he is coming out from a very fearful, very insecure situation of Puritan Revolution, where there was no security either to the life or to the property. And hence he is propounding the idea that there should be a state which should protect the absolute right of individual, that is right to life, right to self-preservation. And that notion of right to life is continued even in today's present context. In majority of the constitutional democracy, we have right to life as the heart of the constitution. Even in our country, Article 21 is considered to be the soul of the constitution, that is right to life. According to him, right to life is so sacred that man can even kill other man for the protection of his life. And it is very explicit in one of the profound statement which is being presented by Thomas Hobbes himself, that I and fear are born together. Right? So let's see. Means right to life includes right to self-defense. Okay, here Hobbes, in the last line, he is propounding the idea that just for the sake of self-preservation, man even has the right to kill other one or the other individual who is posing as a threat to his life. But again, we will have to see this in very deeper clarity, like on what basis we should take a step, and on what basis will the self-defense of killing other prominent threat will be considered as a significant self-defense. In this taking this notion, anyone can kill anyone, right? And hence the Hobbes will propound the idea of state, where state will secure the liberty and right to life of every individual, so that this particular situation of self-defense can be avoided. It also means that life is given by God. State is not the source of right, only protector of right. So here, as we can relate here, that right to life is given as the absolute right to individual, because Hobbes is elucidating the idea that the state is not the provider or the source of the right. The God is the only source of right, and hence it is absolute because it is given by the God. And state is only a means to protect the right, that is the absolute right or right to life. State cannot deprive a person from his right to life in arbitrary manner, which means state can deprive a person from his right to life only in accordance to the procedure established by law under Article 21. This can be a great example, right? We have a provision under Article 21 that the life can only be deprived on the basis of the procedure established by law under the heart of the Constitution or the soul of the Constitution, that is Article 21, which assures right to life to the individual. And hence state do not have any right to deprive anyone from their absolute right, that is right to life, in any arbitrary manner. So this can be a beautiful example to quote and attempt in an answer. Since he considers right to life as absolute, it is one of the reasons to regard Hobbes as the greatest of all individualists. Why it is one of the reasons which is being considered to regard Hobbes as the greatest of all individualists? Why we are calling Hobbes as the greatest of all individualists? Just for his idea that right to life is absolute right. Why we are labeling him as the greatest of all individualists? So let's understand what this term individualist means, right? So individualism means man is prior to state. It means self-interest is supreme. According to Hobbes, man is individualistic by nature and social only out of necessity. What does this mean? So this is showing the stature of Hobbes, because Hobbes, Locke and Rousseau, these are the product of contractualist theorists. They will believe in the formulation of state on the basis of agreement or covenant. What does this mean? So basically, they propound the idea that state is artificial, state is contractual. All individuals who were insecure about their life, they all collaborated together to form a covenant of state or the state to protect their lives. And hence, in contrast to Plato, who gives more priority to the state and says that state is individual writ large, state is natural, the contractualist theorists like Hobbes, Locke and Rousseau, they will always propound the idea that no, state is artificial, state is the creation of man. And hence they will be more individualistic in nature because they give more priority to the man over the state. Man will always be, individual will always be primary for them, and the state will be secondary, because state will be means to protect their absolute right, that is right to life. We will see how these thoughts are being saved when it comes to contractualist theorists like Hobbes, Locke and Rousseau. Okay, so keep this statement in mind. Sometimes it is explicitly asked in exam why Hobbes is considered to be the greatest of all individualist. Comment. Okay, and here this is the premise upon which you can draw your answer. Okay, so what are the various influence on Hobbes? As I've already told you in the introduction that after getting a patronage from tutorship in Calvinist family, he got to explore various parts of Europe and meet the scientific minds, the greatest scientific minds of his time, and they had a greatest influence on Hobbes. So let's see who were some of the influence on Hobbes. Hobbes was influenced by the condition of time and situation of England and France during that time. This is the first and foremost influence on Hobbes, that is the Puritan Revolution of 1641, which had a deep influence on Hobbes in order to shape his political ideology, in order to shape his political perspective. So let's see what are some other persona or personalities or individuals who had influence on Hobbes. He was also influenced by great philosophers like Glaucon, Plato, and Hooker in respect of social contract. Right? So just a slide before, I have told you that Plato was an idealist. Plato was a naturalist who regarded state to be a natural entity or natural creation. Then how he got influenced by Plato when it comes to social contract, where they propound the idea that no, the state is an artificial entity, state is created by man. Plato was the inspiration or a standard to think that no, the idea the Plato is propounding is not something realistic. State is not a natural entity, because in the state of nature, which was non-political, which was non-civic in nature, individual existed without state. Right? Though they were very selfish, though they were very cruel in nature, but still they existed. And hence they propound their idea of contractual theory or social contract theory. That no, all the men with passions, all the men with negative personalities, they came together just to safeguard their lives, just to secure their absolute right, that is right to life. What driven them to come into the contract or agreement to form a state? It was fear. It was their fear. In one of the magnum opus, that is Leviathan, Hobbes himself says that men are mainly driven by fear and their egos, and hence which propound them or propels them to come together and sign an agreement to form a state, and hence they belong to the social contract theory. Okay, so who are the three main propounders of social contract theory? Remember HLR. It is Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau. So Machiavelli on human nature. Okay, so basically Glaucon, Plato, and Hooker, they influenced Hobbes in respect of social contract. Machiavelli on human nature. Just in the previous lecture series we have done with Machiavelli. If you haven't watched that, go and watch that, because it will be a flow of or stream of labyrinth or lecture, where if you understand the previous one, you will be able to understand the next one more efficaciously or effectively. Okay, so Machiavelli, what he propounded when it comes to human nature, he also said that men are coward, fearful, selfish, avaricious in nature, and hence Hobbes is also influenced by Machiavelli. And when he will talk about the human nature, he will also talk on the same line, that we will see in the later lecture. Okay, the next person is Grotius on law of nature as dictates of reason. The Baudin, one of the very prominent philosopher, Baudin on concept of sovereignty, and by inspiration from Baudin, he also propounded, that is Hobbes also propounded his idea of sovereignty, that we will see in this lecture itself, which is very important. And again, Galileo on mechanical nature, very, very important, because Hobbes' methodology of composite resolutive method is influenced by Galileo, where he says that the world, that is matter, is made up of particles, and through vibration of different particles, the particles of the vibrating particle stimulate a sense of passions, a sense of desire within human beings, and hence men are selfish, men are full of passions, fear, and etc. So we will be seeing his methodology in next lecture probably, which is very important, and hence Galileo is the influence which nudged Hobbes to formulate his own methodology of a resolutive composite method, just to give it more scientific edge. And it is very revolutionary, it is very innovative in political science, because first time someone is introducing or seeing the stream or arena of political science from very scientific lens. And where that scientific lens, where that perspective was evolving, it was evolving from Galileo's idea on mechanical nature of world, right? And Decides and Euclid on geometry. He studied physics, geometry, psychology, and politics. That's why he used the scientific materialism method to understand the politics and society. We will see his way of scientific materialism in his methodology, that is composite resolutive method, in greater depth. Okay, so let's see some of the great writings and works of Hobbes. Okay, so first, political philosophy of Hobbes was expressed in his writing. In 1640, he wrote his first work, that is De Corpore Politico. De Corpore Politico was published, which deals with human nature. Okay, so his perspective on human nature is mainly the idea from his work, that is De Corpore Politico. The next work will be Decide, which will mainly talk about the state, basically the authoritative, the absolute authority of state. Then we have his magnum opus, that is Leviathan, which will ultimately talk about the social contract, the profound idea of Hobbes. So in the first part of the book, he has tried to express that fear and glory are the two dominating factors in human nature, but it is the fear which regulates man's action and saves him from becoming savage. As I have already told you, the fear and ego or glory, which these two are the two most important factors which nudge or drive human beings to come together in order to avoid savagism or a savage behavior, and hence they agree with each other. They formulate an agreement to form or create a state, just to safeguard their absolute right, that is right to life, because human beings are savage in nature. If they are not regulated, if they are not monitored, they will act very savage, and hence they can pose threat to each other's life, right? So his first work, that is De Corpore Politico, is kind of basis upon which his entire work will be built upon, his entire theory will be built upon, because this work is talking on the very basic essence of human nature. And just because of this particular human nature, his various objectives will be formulated in his later theory. What led him to think upon this particular idea about human nature in his work, that is De Corpore Politico? His situation. I have just told you about Puritan revolution. He was experiencing the amount of bloodshed which was experiencing in Europe during his time, which led him to think why people are creating this bloodshed just for the sake of power, which ultimately nudged him to think about human nature. And hence he boils down to the point that it is human nature, mainly fear and glory, or fear and ego, which drive people to fight for the power. And hence we come to his next work, that is Decide. His another work, Decide, it was published in 1612, was published. In this book, he stresses further in establishment of superior authority of state by saying that both spiritual and temporal lords should bow down before the authority of Lord Sovereign. And here he is giving first time introducing the idea of sovereignty, where the state is sovereign, and hence all other power, that is spiritual, temporal lords, are or should bow down. Okay, so what is the beautiful metaphor he is trying to explicit? During the medieval Europe, there was a kind of multiple swords or the multiple center of powers, one being church, the other being feudal lords, and hence the term spiritual is somewhere devoting to the idea of church, the rule of church, the rule of papacy. and temporal lords are none other than the feudal lords during his time. And hence he is suggesting the idea that all, both spiritual and temporal lords, should bow down before the authority of Lord Sovereign. So who is the authority of Lord Sovereign? Here the state. And how state is being created? By contract of the people, right? And hence he is establishing the idea of sovereignty, where the people, the contract, the constitution, the agreement of the people is sovereign, and all the other powers, that is spiritual, that is church, and temporal lords, that is feudal lords, should bow down before the authority of Lord Sovereign. This is how you make the connection. This is how you will be able to retain the concepts in deeper clarity. That means he further strengthened the sovereign authority. And now we come to his magnum opus, that is Leviathan. His finest work was his Leviathan, that has made him immortal and elucidated the vivid view of state of nature vis-a-vis of man. Right? It was published in 1651. It is one of the most latest work of Hobbes' life, which gave a solid foundation to the social contract theory of origin of state. What does this mean? In the first work, he talked about the nature of human being and also the state of nature. And thus he is trying to establish how the state of nature will be vis-a-vis human nature, vis-a-vis man. It will be a savage. It will be nasty, poor, brutish. And hence he is establishing a notion of contractual theory, that is origin of state, in his magnum opus, that is Leviathan. Leviathan is a beautiful metaphor given to the state which Hobbes is trying to create in his own work. Leviathan, the term, is metaphorically representing a state which is being idealized by Hobbes. Just to put it in more simple term, Leviathan is kind of a state, okay, which is being formulated by the contract of people. It is a metaphor which was devised by Thomas Hobbes himself, and it is very lesser known to people. Nobody will tell you, but Leviathan, in his magnum opus itself, he mentions that Leviathan is a metaphor to the idealistic or idealized state of Hobbes, which is being formed by the contractual theory against the state of nature and state of or the nature of humans, which is nasty, brutish, and poor. Later on, it was further strengthened and supported by Locke and Rousseau, because they will also be the child of social contract theory. They will somewhere be influenced by the Leviathan of Hobbes, and they will also work on the same line as which was started by Hobbes. In this book, he has dealt with the origin of state and nature of sovereign, and finally the creation of absolute, invisible, and inalienable authority of the sovereign, which knows no limitation from anyone. Okay, Hobbes was the first person to fight, to voice against the theory of double sword. What was the theory of double sword? It was basically the double power that was of monarch and church, which was prevailing in Europe of his time. And hence he was the first to voice against those kind of corrupt or perverted power. And he is the one to first voice about the sovereign authority of people, that is state, which was created by the contractual agreement of people or covenant of people. And hence his work, that is Leviathan, was hugely criticized by church and papacy of his time. Even they have bonfired the book Leviathan in masses. Why? Because it was very revolutionary idea of his time. He was the first to talk about something against the church, something against the monarchy, something against the feudal lords. And he propounded the idea of Leviathan, or a sovereign state, which was created by the agreement, by the reason of people, by the contract, by the social contract, right, which knows no limitation from anyone. What does this mean, that which knows no limitation? It basically means the limitation which was imposed by church and other institutions like feudal lords or monarchy. And hence there will be a sovereign state called as Leviathan, which will know no limit from anyone, and hence it will be sovereign, absolute authority. Okay, so let's see what was his idea of sovereignty. Okay, this is the last topic for today, but it is very beautiful, very insightful, and it was the first idea of sovereignty by Hobbes. Okay, so Thomas Hobbes is the most important thinker to understand principles of modern political life. Why the term modern political life is used here? If you will read it casually, it might get slipped from your brain. But modern political life in itself has an essence here. What is the essence? It is basically talking about a sovereign entity, that is state. It is basically talking against the pre-political civil authority during his time of papacy, that is church, of feudal lords, of monarchy. And hence the modern political life is nothing but a sovereign state, the existence of sovereign state, which is the creation of people by mutual contract, or mutual agreement, or mutual covenant. Principles and practices of modern state will be sovereignty. The most defining feature of the modern state is sovereignty. Hobbes was the first person to give the complete theory of sovereignty. Okay, sovereignty is called as the supreme power. Why supreme power? Again, we have to go back to the just previous slide, supreme power, because it was the power against the power or the principle of two swords. The two different institutions of church and monarchy ruling at the same time. And now this comes the modern connotation of power, that is sovereign power, which will be possessing a supreme power to rule. Sovereignty is a concept of modern times. It means supreme authority to make laws and to enforce law. It will have supreme power to make law. It will also have the supreme power to enforce law. In medieval times, authority was divided, or it was federal. What is federal, or why it was federal? Because it was shared. Let's say if church was responsible to form a law on the basis of religion, on the basis of ethics, monarchy was the one to execute it. Monarchy was the institution to implement it, and hence the power or the division of power was very federal in nature. In medieval times, it was not clear who is supreme, whose law will prevail, or who will have the last word. It led to the state of confusion, chaos. So basically, if I sum up this entire paragraph in two words, it will be a doctrine of two swords. What are swords? It is basically called talwar in Hindi. There was a doctrine of principle of two swords. One sword belonged to the church and the other talwar belonged to the monarchy, or belonged to the feudal lords, the institution of feudalism. And hence it was great chaos or confusion. Whom to follow? Should we follow the church, or we should follow to feudal lords? The people who were more religious, they usually used to follow the ordeal of church. And the people who were not so much religion, the people who fall or who belong to a atheist class, they usually aligned with the feudal lords. And hence there was a great chaos, there was a great confusion. Whom to follow? There should be only one absolute authority, right? Hence there was a need to establish an institution which will be considered as a supreme with respect to law. And here comes Thomas Hobbes. The need became more acute with rise of capitalism. In feudalism, the relation of production will be based on birth, whereas capitalism is based on contract. Why? Just give it a thought. Why, with rise of capitalism, the need for absolute power became more in demand? To just give your idea, if you don't know what feudalism is all about, feudalism is a kind of economy where the production will be based on birth. If father had a property of, let's say, 100 acres, it will pass to the son. It will pass to the next generation. And there will be a certain fixed amount of employees who will work under him. It was completely based on birth. But there came a period of Renaissance in Europe, which led to the idea of scientific revolution, which led to the idea of industrial revolution, which ultimately led to the idea of a spurt in capitalism, where people started voicing against the pre-established or most practiced norms and notions of the society, against feudalism, against standard norms, and hence there arose a chaotic situation, because now it turned very tumultuous, very chaotic, and hence there was a need for a supreme class or supreme authority so as to regulate the rise and monitor the situation. Whereas capitalism is based on contract, hence there was a need of authority who will be responsible for ensuring the law enforce the contract. There are different traditions of law. Okay, what are some of the different traditions of the law? The first is natural law based on reason, which was basically practiced during the time of state of nature, where there was no state, where there was no rule based order. So there was a natural law which was basically practiced based on reason and human instinct. The second type of law is religious law, which is mainly based on book of religion, which basically evolved during the medieval time, where the rule of papacy or church was established. They basically used to practice their law on the basis of the book of religion. If Bible says such, that must be implemented. That was basically a religious law which was based on the book of the religion. The third was the customary law, which was based on customs and traditions that was prevailing in particular culture. And the fourth one is the positive law, which is something needs to be taken into consideration when it comes to Thomas Hobbes. What is positive law? Positive law means a law made by the state. Why it is called as positive? It is called as positive because it is adding something in order to enforce, in order to ensure a harmony in the state. It can be welfare of the people, or it can be to promote justice, and hence it is called as positive law because it is made by the state which is sovereign, the state which is the creation of the man on the basis of social contract. The theory of sovereignty establishes the supremacy of the law made by state over all other tradition of law, and hence the theory of sovereignty will always establish the supremacy of law, that is positive law, which are made by the citizens themselves. The law made by states should be supreme because it is the product of reason, that is rational debate. It is certain that it comes with the power of punishment. Why it is product, or how it is product of reason or rational? Since the idea of sovereignty is based on the social contract theory, which propound the idea that men, they collaborated together, they formulated a social contract to give rise to the state. What will that particular contract or agreement carry? It will basically carry the way in which they want to be ruled, which will ultimately be the product of their own reason. They have resorted to the idea of deliberation, which will be positive for the entire citizens, because through debate, discussion and deliberation they have formulated that agreement upon which they are giving or bestowing the supreme powers to get ruled, and hence it is the product of reason and rational, which is being practiced or established by a sovereign authority of state, which also comes with the power of punishment. Okay, because in one of the theory we will see Hobbes will propound the idea that a covenant without sword is nothing but a word. His very profound statement. What does this mean? A covenant without sword is nothing but a word. What is covenant? A covenant is an agreement which is product of deliberation, reason and rational. Covenant without sword. What is sword? Sword is metaphorical representation of punishment. Is nothing but a word. If there is a covenant or agreement or contract If it does not have a provision for punishment, it will be nothing but a sheer words that shall be of no use, because men are savage by nature, who are mainly driven by their basic nature of fear and glory, and hence they will resort to violence, which can lead to the violation of their absolute right, that is right to life. And hence Hobbes is propounding the idea that covenant without sword, that is power of punishment, is nothing but a word. With this we come to an end, people, aspirants. I hope you guys have enjoyed today's lecture, and I'm hoping to produce such insightful and interesting lecture in due course of time. But I am expecting the same, that you all show your love as well by subscribing to the channel and also like the video. Also do ensure to leave your thought in the comment section. I will give them a read and also come back with a response to you all. With this, have a good day and thank you.